Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti channel by Swami Nikhilananda. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, to Ram Parivar and all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. We are currently studying the scripture Mysticism of Ramayana. Commentary is by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So yesterday we were studying Sita's picking the bow and Lord Rama breaking the bow and the significance of all that, the meanings. So for the masses, success implies attaining fulfillment as an individual. For a spiritual aspirant, on the other hand, the highest success in life is a state in which individuality dissolves in the fullness of eternity, like a river joyfully merging into the fullness of the ocean. So effacing our personality, in other words, quite different from what an average person who is body-centric does. The moment one makes a resolve to become free from the bondage of individuality and attain liberation, Rama, the emergent soul within him, has broken Shiva's bow. So that is like a sankalpa when the wisdom dawns, and has been wedded to Sita, which is the purified intellect. So now the intellect and the soul both become aware of their mission project. In other words, Shubhecha or good aspiration has dawned within the heart. And this happens when there is intense blessings from your many good deeds of many lifetimes, where you come into association with sages and saints and holy scriptures, and something gnaws at us and reminds us that our spiritual journey is the only right answer in this human life. And all other things, while they are important, this is the one that we should be living our life for. The story of sage Parshurama's reaction to the breaking of Shiva's bow is not only colorful but mystically interesting as well. Parshuram was a powerful personality of his time. He was considered a part incarnation of Lord Vishnu. His mission was to bring about harmony by forceful means. He was born during a time when Rajasic Kshatriya kings, who had developed immense pride and conceit, predominated the earth. With his crude expression of divine power, Parshuram eliminated an amazing number of those kings, not once but over and over again, with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth philosophy, which was actually more like many eyes for one eye and many teeth for one tooth. He used violence to counteract the violence practiced by those Kshatriyas. However, by the time Rama incarnated, the type of power that manifested in Parshurama was no longer needed. Therefore, each of these avatars come for a specific purpose, and then they fulfill their mission, and another comes at a later stage based on the requirements at that time. What was needed was a higher movement of the spirit, fighting evil not by brute force, but with intelligence and with goodness. This more sublime movement is symbolized by Rama's mission. In the evolution of an aspirant, Parshuram symbolizes a forceful approach to disciplining the mind and senses, while Rama symbolizes a more subtle and persuasive approach. Both approaches are necessary on the spiritual path, and an aspirant must develop a sensitive way of assessing which is more appropriate at any given time. For example, when our senses are running everywhere, we have to forcibly control those senses for our evolution, and sometimes we have to gently guide them, etc. In general, however, the more one advances, the more subtle is his handling of the inner obstacles in the spiritual development. Everything starts to become more harmonious and spontaneous as we walk on this journey in an advanced manner. When Shiva's bow has been broken and a serious confrontation with the ego has commenced, the soul is then wedded to Sita, or intuitive intellect, With the help of that intellect, spiritual sadhana is intensified and the soul follows the path of nivritti or God realization, which eventually leads one to mukti or liberation. So with this we finish the Balkand. Balkand means, Bal means a child, when Lord Rama was a child. And now we are switching into the second Kanda. Ramayana has different sections which are called a Kanda. Each section is called, chapter is called a Kand. And now we are getting into the Ayodhya Kand. Ayodhya is the capital where King Dashratha was ruling. So now we will switch to the portion of to be or not to be king. After the conclusion of the marriage ceremonies, Rama and his brothers, along with their wives, returned to Ayodhya amidst great festivity and rejoicing. All forms of prosperity flowed to Ayodhya like rivers flowing into the ocean with abundant water during the rains. Filled with love for Rama, King Dashratha approached Guru Vasishtha and expressed his cherished desire to see Rama declared the successor or heir apparent to the throne, so that within his lifetime he could see the kingdom resting in such divine hands. So these kings had a very good way of succession planning. When they saw white hair coming, they would give up power and would want the next generation to take over. And these days we see people in their 80s, 90s also clinging on to power, not willing to let other take control. Times have changed, but initially those were the ways things were being done during Treta Yuga, Lord Rama's time. So sage Vasishtha readily agreed, and plans to enthrone Rama were begun, bringing delight to all the king's ministers and royal officers. Everybody loved Rama, Lord Rama. When the news reached the inner chambers of the palace where Queens Kaushalya and Sumitra dwelled, they too were overjoyed and joined at the preparations. Seeing the great rejoicing in Ayodhya, the gods in the heavens became distressed, because they feared that once Rama became king, he would no longer be interested in killing Ravana, which was the purpose for which they had promoted his incarnation in the first place. Thus they approached goddess Saraswati, the deity presiding over intellect and speech, and appealed to her to find a way to prevent Rama from becoming coronated, while at the same time sending him into forest life so that he could perform his heroic deeds of eradicating demons. So the divine plan has to function mysteriously, and sometimes these things are happening where they are not visible, but the plan is coming to fruition. Sometimes adversity strikes, sometimes prosperity. Even in our own lives we face these situations, and yet there is a divine intelligence that is functioning behind. Finally, overcome by the pleading of the gods, Saraswati Devi thought of a unique scheme to accomplish their objective and came to the earth plane in search of a person whose intellect could be twisted against Rama. However, she found the minds of all the people so eager for his coronation that it was only after extensive searching that Saraswati found one petty-minded personality, the hunchback maid servant of Kaikeyi, whose name was Manthara, who could be manipulated to plant a seed of discontent against Rama. Thus one day, when Manthara was in her own room, she heard the sounds of celebration in the streets and asked what was going on. Because her mistress Queen Kaikeyi lived in a separate palace, the news of the coronation had not yet reached them. Also, King Dashratha had planned to inform his dear Kaikeyi, his wife, about this delightful surprise in person, but had not yet had the opportunity to do so. So when Manthara heard from others that Rama was to be coronated, her heart burned with jealousy due to the secret influence of goddess Saraswati. Why, she kept asking herself, should Rama, the son of Kaushalya, be coronated instead of Bharata, the son of her mistress Kaikeyi? With her twisted intellect, the maid servant then began to plot what she could do to upset the plans for the coronation so that Bharata would be favored for the royal honor instead of Rama. So, this is what jealousy does, breeds planning, conniving, and doing unethical and wrong things. With this in mind, Manthara approached Queen Kaikeyi with a dejected countenance and then started shedding tears. She then informed Kaikeyi that Rama was about to be coronated, but in conveying that news, she created a scenario that would arouse jealousy in the heart of the queen also. Because Kaikeyi was originally very good, she loved Rama a lot, but then, so this is the subtle message of having bad company. So therefore, we should always stick to satsanga and not come under the influence of negative people or bad company. So when we are in holy association of sages, saints, scriptures, we are in the purity and we will be safe. But if we go into demoniac levels or worldly levels, tamasic levels, our downfall is fairly quick. So this is what happened to Kaikeyi. Originally she was a very good queen and loved Rama, but all of a sudden jealousy crept in. With great effort she convinced her mistress that the king had deliberately sent Bharata away from Ayodhya to visit Kaikeyi's parents at that time, and that he had deliberately chosen not to tell Kaikeyi about the coronation as part of the plan to degrade and humiliate Kaikeyi while glorifying Kaushalya. So she completely twisted the events. Manthara did. Further, Manthara convinced the queen that if Rama ascended the throne, she would become a maid servant of Kaushalya and live a life of misery. So all these negative emotions start to plant seed, and one imagines the worst. Sorely afflicted by the arrow of Manthara's evil intent, Kaikeyi begged the maid servant to help her upset the plans for Rama's coronation. Manthara then reminded Kaikeyi that the king had once offered to fulfill any two boons of her choice and suggested that this was the perfect time to make the two requests. So we will cover this in tomorrow's satsang. This is Swami Nikhilanand. Om Tat Sat.